Welcome to episode 42 of the 50 Yard Line, everybody. You may recall a couple of years ago I was frequently commentating on home games for SGS American Football in Filton. One of the games I did was SGS versus the Cardiff Cobras on a freezing cold afternoon. I was joined up in the booth that day by Steve Price, a fellow commentator and the owner of a company called Sport Tank. A couple of months ago, Steve got in contact with me and told me he was putting a team together to commentate on Bucks football games in the Northwest. That's the University League for American football in the UK, for those of you who are wondering. To which I happily said yes. I very much miss working in sports journalism, so I'm grateful for the opportunity. The season starts at the end of October, and I can't wait to be back in the booth for Sport Tank this time. In the meantime, I thought today would be a good opportunity to have Steve on my show as a guest. He joins me now. Thank you for coming on, Steve.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here, Stefan. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem. So I thought I'd start with, for those of the people listening who aren't familiar, what is Sport Tank and what does it do? What are the company goals, etc.? Yeah.
How long have you got? Because it's so essentially right now, if you look at our website, we've got an online presence. We cover British American football from a media perspective, and we're the largest independent American football outlet in the UK that focuses on the British game. Now that sounds like a very impressive moniker, but it's not that impressive because it's not a very saturated market, right? So but we are seen as like part of the scenery in the sport. People rely on us for information, whether that's scores, whether that's league tables. We do as you've just mentioned, we do some live streams. That's more like value add to the sport, helping it grow. But then we also have got like opinion based stuff. So reports, predictions, picks. We've got a podcast that runs weekly that looks at, it's called The Rundown. It just looks at like what's happened in the previous week and then what's happening next week. Very straightforward stuff in the game. So that typically focuses on fixtures, but then it may do a little bit of like if there's any sort of like breaking news, something's happened in the sport, a rule change or whatever. Just so that people articulate it. But then we also have got written versions of that. So if there are rule changes, we do, an article of it. And then we also do, we started to do a few more interviews actually. So we've got a young journalist student called Alfie, who's we're sort of building up now, and he started to do a little bit more content. And we're starting him with interviews because that's fairly straightforward. You don't have to have loads of knowledge of the history of the sport. So yeah, we started off under a different name. And if you go right back to the beginning, the conception was really a WhatsApp chat between me and a teammate of mine 11 years ago. And we were sending each other memes. Now, memes weren't as popular as they are now. People didn't know what a meme was. A lot of people didn't.
What year was this?
Sorry?
What year was
2013.
this? 2013. Okay. The really old
And
days of memes then, yeah.
Yeah. It was really early doors, and people were still saying "mem," like didn't understand it, didn't get what it was. But then you had really strong reactions to it because of it, So we made a couple of memes back and forth to each other one evening. Thought it was pretty funny. Found ourselves funny, right? And then was like, how can we? Like, we got to share this with everyone. What's the best way of sharing it? And we just put it on created a Facebook page, called it UK Gridiron Memes. I think that's
I followed it. I thought it was hilarious, to be honest with you.
It went nuts.
Yeah.
So like, do you know what? I don't know the tracking of the following because we just like ride in the wave, right? But in terms of like within the little subculture of our sport in the UK, and it spread out to Europe as well, and some to the States. It went viral, like the number of people that were joining was in the hundreds a day for a long time, and it became like a, I don't know, again, I wouldn't say a staple because it was poking fun at stuff, and mostly from a player's perspective, like, oh, don't you hate this rule or the fact that this happens or when you play this sort of team or this type of teammate or whatever. And then we would come up with an idea, and then we would attach it to a person or a team or whatever, and then that would, flame people, or they would love it because it was a positive thing or whatever. And we then started, because we garnered this huge audience. We started doing more like positive, like, well, not that I don't see. A lot of people say the memes weren't positive, but I would argue that they were, because they, in some instances, they held people accountable in the sport, and organizations in the sport accountable that weren't previously accountable to stuff. And it was like shining a light. We were this big platform. Yeah, but we were doing stuff like giveaways, and we were doing picks, picks leagues and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of that work was going unappreciated or underappreciated, because it was tied to a meme page. So we then developed. So we had plans to develop more stuff, like, again, essentially what then became Sport Tank, right? So we initially called the website Gridiron Hub, and we then had articles, etc. We did have the memes at first, but we separated them away because we had an agreement. We had a contract with a relationship with the NFL, and as Gridiron Hub, the new outlet, and they didn't like the memes being attached to it, so we separated it, and it's been separated ever since. The idea initially was to go into multiple hubs, different sports, so rugby hub, football hub, and then have the overall a centralized entity above it all called Hub Chief. So I bought like the domain for that, and I was looking at all the other domains, and then when it came to start to like look at setting up the other entities, like I looked at like the social media handles and stuff. Everything was taken for Hub, so Hub was too popular, and so even though I had Hub Chief, I didn't have all the other ones, and so we had to change the name, and we also in changing the name, we also separated more from Gridiron Memes, because it was called UK Gridiron Memes, became Gridiron Memes, and there was Gridiron Hub, and there was always that name association even after we'd split. And there's probably still people out there now that think that it's part of what we do, but it certainly isn't. It does exist. It's got 12,000, or it had 12,000 followers. I think they've lost a few now. Yeah, it was a big thing. Very proud of what we did, but happy to leave it behind because I wanted to move forward with having a positive impact and helping grow in the sport in the UK. But yeah, so we look to go into more sports, and then came up with Sport Tank. So the way that happened was Hub was the word that we had, and I looked at synonyms for it, and tank was one of the synonyms. And then I just obviously the word sport ends in T, tank begins with T, so we just put them together, got rid of one of the T's, and that's where we got our name. But yeah, in terms of like, so there was a whole rebrand. We've got a non-profit arm as well that raises money for sports development through online raffles. So we've got licensed online raffles that we do. We're just about to. So the future for that is that we're going to have a subscription model for cash raffles, which we haven't done before. That's being built now, and the goal is to try and give away £1,000 a week in funding, which would be amazing. And that would go to very well. We've expanded the scope from just American football to multiple sports for that. So we'll be starting to invite other people from other sports onto the platform to ask for funding. And then there's other bits and pieces. Essentially, what the best way I can describe what we're working on is that we essentially everything that we do for our sport. At the moment, we want to enable others to be able to do so, to be able to act like a platform, and then other people from other sports, including our own, can use that platform and use tools to create the content, so that we become more of like like platform owners that encourage participation and sign-ups on the platform. There's another element to it which is sort of live but not properly built out, where you can have your own like profile, your own athletic profile. So if you've been a coach, player, referee, any sort of involvement in sport, think of it like LinkedIn. So like
Yeah.
here's all your experience, all of like your measurements. So like your height, weight, your lifts, your personal bests, all of that sort of stuff. Your achievements. If you've won leagues, if you've won MVPs, all that sort of stuff. And then all importantly, which is what we're waiting to build out, is stats. So the stats will be on there as well, and you can see everything. So like a real comprehensive place to have sporting information. So you've got stuff for fans and you've got stuff for athletes, and the idea, similar to again LinkedIn, is to have like a talent network to help pathways for players to find
Yeah, just going to ask
semi-professional.
that. So you could
Yeah,
use it in
semi-professional,
recruitment. Yeah.
professional, and
Yeah.
then and obviously university is such a big thing. But obviously not just doing that for British for American football, doing it for multiple sports as well.
Yeah.
But certainly British American football is the pioneer. I was going to say guinea pig, but pioneer in it. Everything that we do, we're going to be solving for that for that sport initially. Trying to figure out how these different tools and elements of the platform work, and that's sort of our way of giving back to the sport as well, so that it's sort of that there's a lot of different ways of looking at what Sport Tank's going to be. One of the things that I because we're speaking to investors, one of the ways I describe it to them is being able to provide a professional experience for sporting involvement, all the way down to grassroots. So it doesn't matter what level you're playing at. We're using technology to help you, create a profile, create a presence to show off your stats, to show off, what you've done, and like I said, hopefully open up pathways for development. And that's just not development of individuals; it's also for team. Like, make it easier. Let's say if you wanted to start a lacrosse team in Sheffield. We want to be able to give you the tools to help you do that and help find people and have a platform where you can, organize a league, organize games, all of that sort of stuff. So there's a hell of a lot of stuff to develop
Yeah.
at the moment. But if you went on at face value right now, it's a media outlet for American football.
How far in the future is all that stuff that you mentioned?
So it's constantly being worked on. So we've got an idea of what we want as a minimum viable product, and that's it. So a lot of it depends on if and when we get investment. Investment essentially accelerates development. That's essential. So regardless of whether we get investment or not, it will happen because this is a passion project for me. I put a lot of money into it. It will continue. But yeah, so if we don't get investment, you're probably looking 2 to 3 years. With investment, you're probably looking 18 months. Like I said, there's already elements of it available. We just don't promote it much because I don't know. It's sort of like it's not
The
quite
work
there.
in
So
progress, isn't it?
yeah, like I don't want to,
Yeah.
I don't want to wax lyrical about it and get everyone using it, and then they're like, and
Yeah.
it's not what it will be.
Gotta
So
wait
we want
until
to
the
get it
final
to that
product. So do you
minimum
have people?
viable level.
So do you have like software engineers working on that, or do you do it all yourself? Yeah.
Yeah. So we got So no, I don't know anything
Yeah.
about like coding or anything. So
Yeah.
we've had a web developer work with us from Gridiron Hub days. So he's built the whole thing, and we've had multiple different freelancers come in for different pieces if we needed specialisms. And then, so for example, at the moment, I've got a copywriter and a UX UI designer, graphic designer, building out what the web pages are going to look like for this new subscription model, which is quite involved because an element of it is that we're going to help clubs create a revenue stream. So if this is exclusive, by the way. So if a club signs up as an affiliate and then someone buys a subscription through that, we will give 10% of that subscription to the club for as long as that person is a member or a subscriber. So the idea is that clubs can get people to sign up and build out a little, not huge, but a little revenue stream where they can earn money every single month. And that's another way of us trying to sort of think about how we can grow the game But that's also for, we will expand that to multiple sports. We're just, again, like with everything else, we're going to start it in American football, figure out all of, iron everything out, make sure it all works properly, and then expand it. So so that's that's just another, I suppose, idea of like another idea that we're sort of putting in place. And that's probably the next thing that gets launched. I'm hoping that by the end of this year that will be launched, because we've got the front end being done, and then the back end needs. So I don't know if you're familiar. Front end is what you see on a website. Back end is like the workings behind it, the code.
Yeah.
So so the front and back end needs, basically someone creates the shell. The designer creates the shell. The copywriter sort of like make sure that it all makes sense and the wording's correct and all that, and then the techie guy Dom will come in and he'll plug it all in and code everything and make it all work. So so there's a lot more work to do for that, but that's sort of where we are. But so we there are people that, so anyone that works on the platform side of the development platform side is paid, and they're paid by me. And anyone that works on the content creation or the media side is a volunteer. So everyone that commentates, writes blogs, all of that sort of stuff, they all work voluntarily at the moment. The idea hopefully is that once we start creating revenue streams, that we'll be able to start to pay people for their time, which will be great. But it's, like I said, it's a passion project at the moment that I'm trying to legitimize and turn into well, not illegitimate, but trying to turn into a viable, that's a better word, turn into a viable business.
Very happy to be a part of it in the early days, even though technically it's been 11 years. But
well, see, Sport Tank's only a couple of years old, but it's been 11 years in the making, which is crazy. But then it sort of morphed and pivoted in that time. Like, we didn't start off wanting to make money, like with memes and all that sort of stuff. And we were like, like my goal, like my dream would be to be able to leave my full-time work as well as, a couple of other people, and we all work full-time on this thing, right? Like that would be amazing. But it's got to be, you've got to make it like a valuable thing that people are going to want to put money into, whether that's from a corporate or a personal perspective, and that's essentially what we're doing with this MVP. It's the speed to money, like it's the race to getting the first lot of money through, and then the idea is that money gets reinvested and we build more, and hopefully we end up building a nice big company out of it.
But I'm more than happy to help you out in any way that I can, because I would also love to do this full time. It is something I'm passionate about. I think we're in the same boat in that regard. I think this project, regardless, if it doesn't make any money, then at the very least, it sounds like it's going to be really helpful for the development of the sport in the UK. Definitely American football. I can't speak for the other sports because I don't know as much about them. But it's like when you look at if you look at my YouTube channel, if you go a few years further down, I did a video, and this is actually based on an article that I wrote when I was a full-time journalist. It's the history of American football in the UK, and how far it goes back. It actually goes back to 1910, but if you ask most people, they say, American football began in the UK in the 80s, which is the official birth date of it. So when American football first came to the UK, they started playing games in 1985. Like, that was when officially, even though the first game shown was Super Bowl 17, it was the Redskins and the Dolphins on Channel 4. So the birth of Channel 4 was actually the biggest thing in pioneering American football in the UK.
Without a doubt.
If you go back to those days, everybody who was alive at the time to speak of it so fondly, like say, it was such a great time, it was such an exciting time. And if you look at the old videos, there's like loads of people go and watch them. So every game was like a semi-final or a final for the Brit Bowl. And in those days, if you ask somebody in those days, what do you think the sport is going to be like in the UK in 40 years' time, or 39 years' time, technically, they would say, we'll have our own professional league, it'll be huge, and it's like our players will be able to compete with the Americans, and just like there'll be English players in the NFL. I would assume some of them would say, maybe that'd be a bit optimistic. There have been a few English players in the NFL, which is great. But obviously we're lagging behind massively, and that's never really come to reality. It's improved a lot, obviously, but Germany and France, who are way ahead of the UK, I'm just like, why do you think that is? Even though we got a head start on them.
I've got a lot of and Nice summary, actually. I didn't know about the 1910 thing. I'll have to have a
Yeah,
look at your
so
your
just go off
content on
to,
that.
so if
But
you want me to tell you, 1910 was there was US
yeah,
soldiers when they were based over here had decided they were going to have a game, and the
right,
people in the town went and watched it, and then they did that again in 1914 during the First World War, and then
right.
they brought it back in the 1940s, and then they had some big games in London and in Ireland. I think they were called the Coffee and the Tea Bowl, where the Canadian Air Force played against the US Air Force.
Right.
It was very
Oh,
yeah.
that's
I've got the
interesting.
video on my YouTube channel. You can
Yeah,
find
I'll have to watch it.
yeah.
But yeah,
So
anyway, to your
yeah.
question,
Anyway, to
why
my
do I
question.
think
Yeah.
uh I think there's a combination of reasons. I it, what you've said is actually part of the reason that one of the things that motivates me. So let me just tell a quick story before I go back to what I think the reasons are. So I started playing the sport when I was 11 years old in America. My dad was in the Navy. We moved over to the States. My friends played it. I was like, yeah, let me try that out. That looks cool with the helmet and all that.
Were your
I was
friends
aware of the
American
sport.
or were they also British?
One American, one South African.
They were all
But
naval sons of Navy men. Yeah.
no. Just
No.
the area was. It wasn't a
Okay.
naval area. It was. But that's typical of. So we were just outside of Washington D.C.
Okay.
and you get a lot of migrants there, military, diplomatic. So the American's dad was a Texan congressman, and the South African's dad was a South African journalist. So
Interesting.
it was funny. Like everyone's parents at the school I went to, one of them had like a cool job, whether it's Secret Service or they were a diplomat or whatever. So it was a really
CIA
strange.
or
Yes, yeah, we had a woman two doors down that worked for the CIA, and her daughter. I went to school with her daughter. So like it was, yeah, that was like what the
what an
area was like.
interesting place Washington is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was cool. And anyway, yeah. So the CIA was like literally just down like Langley
Yeah,
was
Langley,
where the
Virginia.
CIA is. So I played
Yeah.
rugby for Langley while I was there. We used to train right next to the Langley headquarters where the Mission Impossible thing was.
Insane.
Anyway, so I got heavily into the sport and I was quite successful within the few years I played it out there. So I ended up being a captain of Virginia State Juniors. In the States, the way that it worked was like you played like it's like a winter sport, so they'll probably just start getting prepared. It aligns to like high school, right? But I was
Yeah.
playing outside of high school in the Pop Warner League. I was 11, right? But the way that it works is like you play that league, and then the best players get picked to go and try out for All Stars, and then you play in an All Star competition, and then the best players from that go to play in a regional, and then the best players from that go and play state. And so my second year, I made my way all the way through to state. My first year was a wash, but anyway, I came back to the UK, and I was a good prospect, and like through like my friend's dad, who was the congressman in Texas, he
What
got
was the
Texas A.
Congress name? Do you remember?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Greg Laughlin, or
Okay.
Laughlin, we would say, but Laughlin in America.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still friend. Brad was my friend. I'm still friends with him.
And was this the 90s?
Yep.
Yeah.
1994 was when
Yeah.
when I went there.
I mean, I am very interested in US politics, so I could probably.
Oh right, yeah. So famously, while I was I think it was 96 or 97, Greg changed parties from Democrat to Republican or Republican to Democrat. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And that was a huge thing. He was on the news, and I was like, oh look, there he's on the telly.
I do actually
anyway,
recall reading about that. Yeah.
He was
Very
Greg's
interesting.
awesome guy. He used to help us with football. He used to me and Brad and Simon, the other guy, he'd play with us and stuff. And but yeah, he had Texas A&M in his district, and got them to look at me. And so we went to like a camp, went down there to a camp for like their prospects in the summer. So I got trained by all of their like coaches, and you played at Texas A&M's ground and all that sort of stuff with all these other people from different schools in the US. So it was quite cool. So I played at a good level, and I was quite good. I wasn't good my first year, but after that I was. Came back to the UK and was like, I want to continue playing, and I couldn't find any teams. I couldn't find anyone. I didn't know where to look online. If I did find something, I would email someone and never hear back. And I ended up going to play rugby. for a number of years until I was about 24 and I found American football again. And it annoys me that, like, as a kid that was like 15, 16, I couldn't find anywhere to play. And that's why I'm so keen on development paths and making sure that people can find sport. Because I, I basically, I don't know. I still was okay when I started playing again, but I sort of like my momentum in the sport just took a massive dip because of it. And yeah, so like that's like a big motivation for me for what I do for the sport. Anyway, going back to the question, why do I think it's not why do I think it's not where it should be in terms of it should be professional? We should have professional, semi-pro, and amateur leagues in this country. The reason I believe that it hasn't got there is because of two things: greed and ego. And this probably sound controversial, and I don't mean it to sound controversial, but essentially, where the sport was a minority sport, fairly unregulated, people. What I've learned is that people will get involved in minority sports not because they love the sport, but because they love the power that they can easily achieve, because there's not many people that are getting involved in the sport, right? So it's easier to get more involved and to gain, I don't know, a head coach role or a general manager role or a national governing body role or a league management role. And so, you end up with people that probably are fans of the sport. You might get some of those that don't really have the right necessary skills to develop a sport, but then there's also a lot of people that don't control their emotions well, have got large egos and don't make decisions for the sport. They make the decisions for themselves. And then there have been people that have actually stolen, and or not. Well, there have been people that have stolen. There are people that think about the sport as a way of them earning money. And that's what I say when I mean taking money away from the sport. So there are people that have like developed, I don't know, clubs or and then made people pay to play, and then they just take that money themselves rather than do something to make the club better. And there's been loads of instances of that, and I think that every time that the sport has sort of got to a point where it is
profitable.
No, like played at a good level,
Okay.
and sort of like being taken seriously by athletes from other sports coming over, they just squander the opportunity. I think there's also a lot of things around the mindset of the game. People constantly compare their league to the NFL, and it may as well be a completely different sport, right? Like it's like you can't compare them, right? So people are always looking for this perfection. They want everything to look good, the sideline, the fan experience, there to be bleachers and a proper marked field and 100-yard fields and all of this other
Well,
stuff.
maybe they
Everyone
could
with the
start
right
with high
colour
school.
helmet.
Can
Sorry?
start with comparing it to high school football, maybe.
Well, even that,
Yeah.
like, I mean, there's some high schools in Texas at 80,000 people a
I
game.
was gonna say maybe high
So
school football and maybe in the Midwest rather than
yeah,
Texas.
exactly. Yeah, like, but they don't, and so therefore they're like, well, until we get that, we won't get sponsors. There's no point. And then you're like, well, you're missing out on sponsors, because sponsors actually care more about exposure than their exposure than they do about the different color helmets of team of players on a team,
Yep.
right? So there's always this talk about, oh, we need to be more professional, and it's like everyone's waiting for like the perfect moment for something to happen, and it never happens. I will say though that in recent years, the national governing body has worked very hard to align themselves to Sport England in terms of structure, compliance, governance, which will then make us the sport more attractive. One, to be able to get funding, which we've just started to do. The first amount of money has been confirmed, £250,000 from Sport England about 2 months ago. Obviously, that money's all allocated. They've already said how they're going to spend it, but that's a lot of money into the sport, right? But most of that will probably go to flag football rather than contact. But still, it's
Because
good.
of the Olympics, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So like that, the sport wouldn't have been able to get that 5-6 years ago, right? Just was a mess. So and it was structured incorrectly, governed incorrectly, and there were people with some with good, some with bad intentions that were in senior roles, and no one really making the right decisions, just letting everything tick over. And that's essentially been what's happened for years and years. I feel like now we're on the cusp of proper growth, right? So I believe that in the next, hopefully, like 5 years, we should. Well, I think we should immediately have a semi-pro league. I think the sport's ready, like for an upper echelon um, semi-pro, and then I think within 5 years we should be a goal should be to have a pro
Yeah.
league. Now,
Yeah, Germany's done it a long time ago.
yeah, yeah, Germany and Austria, they're always used as like the shining lights in European football. But I think a better case study is actually Poland. So I remember I think it's 2009. It might be 2008. Poland had one season. They'd had American football in the year in their country for 1 year. They had a league, and the champions of that first year were the Krakow Eagles. I think it was. I might be getting the name wrong. I think that's what it was. And there was a couple of people that were on the coaching staff there that had been at the London Blitz, and they knew some coaches in the UK, obviously. And my coach at the time, Steve Rains, and Ian Ellis, my defensive coordinator, got invited over in the off season to go and train this Polish team they're national champions, right? But it's only been 1 year. They're still quite raw. And I got invited over there as the player, right? So I was like doing all the drills with them and stuff. And I think it was something like 7 years later, that team were playing in a 32,000 seater stadium with everyone as a professional player.
So yeah, it
So
can be done
exactly,
in a
so
short
I
time
know
span.
it can be done, and I think there's an element of like crabs in a bucket with it, where people who maybe aren't as good at the sport and just play for participation are pulling everyone down and preventing things like from really growing. Where like you get a lot of people moaning
In
and
Yeah, so how do you mean that? Do you mean like they're complaining that, oh, I should be getting on the field as much as this guy, or is
oh
it?
no, I just
Yeah.
mean like, oh, it will never work. You won't find the stadiums. You won't be able to do this. You won't
Ah,
find the
okay, right.
people. Like there's just a lot of
Yeah,
naysayers, and
yeah.
yeah,
I
and
guess that,
I think
yeah,
there is an element of validity in this stuff, but they're more risks that you associate, not stoppers, right? And yeah, I just think with the right people in charge of that effort, it will happen. The problem is like there's always like splinter leagues and people trying to break away in the sport. Like it happens at club level as well. Like there'll be an argument between the coaches, and then some coaches will leave, and then they'll try and create another team, and then it dilutes the playing pool, and that's a problem for the sport. But that's
yeah.
I don't yeah I feel like with the standards that have been recently brought in by the national governing body, a lot of that's being dealt with. So like minimum player numbers, minimum requirements for coaching certification,
Yeah.
stuff like that's sort of weeding out some of these like just jokes of teams that have been spun up. But yeah, so yeah, it's I feel like that. Yeah, the biggest thing in the past has been ego and money, but I do feel like we're now on the right path. I genuinely mean that. Like I feel like the national governing body, unfortunately, the national governing body at the moment, that they actually run the league as well. I think that needs to separate out. So there's a
This is
governing body,
BAFA, right?
BAFA, yeah, British
Yeah.
American Football
Okay.
Association. So they actually run the domestic leagues as well, which is something we need to move away from. They've already moved away from it in flag, so they've separated flag from BAFA. Flag are going to have their own league management system that's independent, I think the same needs to happen for the contact side as well, so that BAFA can just focus on uh, the governance of the sport, the safety of it, etc. And people that run the league can focus on fixtures and disciplinaries and all that sort of stuff that need to happen. There have been people that have tried to create. There's a recent effort for some guys trying to create a spin-off pro league. I've been very vocal about how it will just fall on its face because of the people that are involved. These are people that have had, going back to the whole ego and money thing. They're people that have exemplified that and just tried loads of different things over the years. They've got no credibility. They're not the right people to bring it forward. The idea is spot on, but you need the right people to execute. And so we've got that, I believe, at the national governing body level now. And hopefully we can start seeing that happen more at league level too. And then we can get to that professional league point.
Sounds great, yeah. I think the future's definitely brighter than it was, let's say, 10 years ago.
I think the sport's shrinking in terms of number of participants, and number of teams, and it will be number of leagues. But I think
the quality of it.
Again, this is controversial. I think that's actually necessary.
Yeah,
because the sport is extremely dangerous, right? And when you're playing it at an amateur level, you've got to have a certain level of commitment to be able to play it safely as possible. And what we get, and like there was an instance where a young lad tried the sport. There were no qualified coaches, and he was he didn't have his helmet on, and he was up against other people with a helmet on. He got hit in the head during the session, and the next day he collapsed and died. Now it's never been attributed to that. Well, the coroner said he died from having 2 concussions. So basically, the thinking is he had the first concussion by hitting his head there, and the second one was when he fainted and hit his head on the floor.
Okay.
But yeah, and like there's been over the last 2 years, I think there's been 3 heart attacks in the game. I've literally seen like limbs hanging off, right, in the last couple of years in games that we've live streamed. So it's a very dangerous, very violent sport, and the rules are always being changed to help that out and protect players, protect players from certain exposure to certain types of contact. And I'm all for it, like to make the game safer. I just don't feel that it's a game it's not a Sunday pub league type sport. You have to have a certain level of commitment to it, and unfortunately, we've got a lot of Sunday pub league type organizations and teams and players and coaches, and I feel that needs to, and it's been shrinking because of these standards that the national governing body are bringing in. I think it needs to shrink a little bit more, and so that, and this may, I don't know, people may listen to me and say, oh well, that's just an elitist mindset. I do think people can still play because they want to participate and they love the sport. I want to start playing again next year, and I'm 42 this weekend, right? So like, I don't feel like I'm going to be, the one of the high performance player, but I'm going to enjoy it, right?
Yeah, you're in decent shape. I'm just like, I personally think that you should be. Well, I don't know how you can enforce it, but you really should be working out in the gym so you got at least some strength. Because if you've never worked out, you've never played any other sports, and you jump straight into full contact 11 match football, you're gonna.
And that's what happens. We do see it, and like me when I played, I've had guys like 6'4". I'm only 5'8", right? So I've had people like 6'3", 6'4", like linemen grab hold of me, and I've been able to grab them and throw them. And thinking, like, what are you doing with your time? You just sit down at home all day,
Because you don't take the strength and conditioning side of it seriously. They probably spend all the free time playing video games and eating junk.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that's a problem where we've got fan participants, and it's great that there's fans of the sports and people know Madden and all that. But again, it's like comparing yourself to the NFL. Like it's a classic. I mean, we did memes about this where you get a rookie coming into a session, and then all they want to do is talk about the NFL with you. And you're like, no, you need to focus on this drill because this drill is going to teach you how to tackle, for example. One right?
That I remember was I can't remember if it was you guys or if it was Daily Brickball. Was NFL is like new player shares NFL's hardest hits video and says he can't wait for it on the Facebook page.
Yeah.
And that's pretty typical.
I think we both covered that type of topic. Yeah, and that's it. And it's like they're looking more for a fan zone type community rather than to actually play the game.
Well,
they're more interested in
football if that's what they want. If that's what they want, it's a lot safer.
Like, there is exactly, and that's sort of what I'm getting at with this. Like, we need to keep the sport safe and it needs to be grown in the right way. And I actually think, ironically, to grow the sport, it needs to shrink down in numbers and increase in commitment levels and expectations that people have got who participate in it at every level. And I think that that's a way of actually growing into this semi-pro pro league, pro league structure. The other thing that comes up a lot. So you've got the European League of Football, the ELF.
Yeah.
I'm almost fed up of hearing it. People saying, "Oh, when do you reckon X team are going to be entered? When are the UK going to have a team?" And I've heard this from the conception of the ELF, which was about 6 years ago, I think. Probably until last week, right? Like, there's always.
I was still in college. I remember it. College in the US. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's in its third season now. It's doing really well, and basically every year that goes by, the stakes are increased. Like the minimum entry level.
Yeah,
the standards are increased in that league, just like it should be, right? So, I don't know, to get involved from day one, it was probably, I don't know, a few €1,000, and now apparently, this is hearsay, so I don't want to sort of like preface that. I think it's a couple of €100,000 to that a team have to be in, and they have to have a 5-year commitment or something. And like, there's no team in the UK that could do that. No team in the UK ever. Like in our current structure, right?
Well, I guess you'd need somebody who's got a lot of money to fund it.
And that's the other thing. So I've seen bids from like a team. They were going to set a group got together to set up a team in Bristol, and set up a new team, not an existing team that would then be migrated over, a brand new team. And they were getting like investors in to cover all of the financial side. And they approached the ELF, and the ELF said no because they wanted the team in London. Because they're European guys that don't. I get it at work, right? So my company I work for is Austrian. Previous company I worked for were from the Czech Republic. And when we were talking about setting up a UK office, they were like, "Oh, we got to be in London." I was like, "Well, actually, outside of London to the west side, you've got like Microsoft, Oracle. You've got loads of like tech talent on the M4 corridor."
They won't understand it if they don't live here, but London,
like, no, all they know is London.
It's not the same place it was 20 years ago. It is a very dangerous and very expensive place at the moment.
But I would say Bristol, Manchester, Liverpool, Glasgow, Edinburgh,
I would so much rather live in any of those places that you've mentioned. Yeah.
I think all of them could sustain a professional team. And I think that was the problem. They thought, "Oh, you won't get the fans."
It's too expensive to expect some semi-professional even players to think, "Oh, £1 million if you want to buy a flat, and this is in the worst area of London imaginable." Yeah. I was like, "Oh, it's a shoebox basically. It's a studio apartment that has a bed in it and nothing else."
Yeah. No windows.
I was like, I would so much rather live somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But and so there have been genuine attempts. People are in the UK are interested in it. They can see, that there's a market for it. That we could fill stadiums or a stadium, because it would just be one. Yeah. Well, you could do multiple teams.
Also, when I played in Bristol as well, we got loads of people come to our games.
Yeah,
we still do. I mean, we really should have had stands put up because loads.
Yeah, I think that's something they were going to do.
Yeah.
I think they've got a plan to do that at Bristol. Hopefully they get it done. That'd be awesome.
But Coach Herod told me last time I was there, and Steve Mass told me last time I was there. Yeah. Speaking of when I played in Bristol, I played there for 3 years, as everybody watching this will probably know. We had a really really big beef, I guess would be the only word that comes to mind, with BAFA at the time. They hated us. They kept purposefully trying to hold us back with all of the politics going on behind the scenes, and Coach Herod would constantly tell us, "Don't get involved in the politics, just leave it to us." But couldn't help ourselves. We always did in the social media age. We just
it's hard to not get involved in politics, political stuff,
because it was directly affecting us as well. Especially, so they were like, for the best example I can think of was in October of 2016, we played against the French national team in France. And they told us originally, "You're not allowed to advertise it as playing against the French national team, because only the GB Lions," which we didn't even have a team at the time for the GB Lions, "can play against an international team." So they said, "Okay, what if we advertise it as a team from France?" And they said, "Yeah, that's fine, you can do that." We went to France in Vichy. We drove through Paris at rush hour. It took us 18 hours to get there. Absolutely shattered. We played and we won 14-7. We came back expecting everybody to be like, "Oh, great job, guys! It's so good for the sport in the UK that a British team went against not even the national team. A British team went up and beat the French national team. With France are obviously light years ahead of us at the time in terms of like their quality of play. We came back and they were like put sanctions against us. I was like, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but they said you weren't allowed to do that. You weren't allowed to advertise it, and they tried to make us take it down from everywhere. I believe. I was like, Herod would have a better understanding of it than I do. It's I'm just going to memory from years ago.
Yeah, I think that's again for me that going back to my point about what's holding the sport back. That would fall under the category of ego, right?
Exactly. Yes. So I don't understand it though, because they could look at that and think we've got a team in the UK that can literally can beat any of the teams in Europe potentially. Could potentially they beat France? So it's like, okay, can they beat Germany? Because Germany were the reigning champions, I believe. And if they can, then maybe they think, oh, let's work together, work something out for the benefit of the sport in the UK. But they never did. They tried to hold us back, and that's why one of the reasons why I started to really hate them. I refused to play in BAFA after that, actually, and a lot of the players did. I also think that, obviously, I said they didn't have a GB Lions team at the time. When they eventually did have a team, I think they were very picky with the players. They didn't pick the best players by any means necessary. They picked players who, maybe they played for their club team. It was more of like,
they know the
playbook,
all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it was very, it was very political. Yeah, so I really didn't like him. Another thing was, you would probably know more about this than I do. They joined IFAF. There's two leagues, right? From my understanding of it, were at the time. There was IFAF, and I don't know what it stands for. IFAF USA,
International Federation of American Football.
Okay, IFAF USA and IFAF France. So the one that we wanted to be a part of really was IFAF France. And this might come back to the stuff you were saying about trying to compare ourselves to the NFL. The French one allowed us to play against all these European teams, right? The USA one didn't, but it was like playing under the USA rules. So, we want to be like the NFL, so we're going to be part of the IFAF USA. It didn't benefit us in the slightest. So, what do you have to say about that? Do you think that was a bad move, or do you think I'm missing something out?
No, I mean, I feel like any association, any exposure to a better level, and whether that's on or off the field, right? Like coaches learn from coaches, managers, club managers learn from club managers, etc. So the more you close yourself off and put walls up and don't let yourself in, and this goes for, I suppose, even at a club level, the less opportunity for growth you've got. If you think you've got everything right and there's nothing else to do, you're in a very dangerous place, right? The only constant in life is change, right? So you need to get used to change and you need to endorse it and encourage it. And so if you've got people that, I see it as forward thinking when people try to open up these opportunities. And you're right. I would hasten to add that BAFA at the time were exactly like that, but I would say BAFA now aren't.
Yeah.
And they didn't want people to share stuff and do other things because they didn't want to be compared to anything else that was out there, or for other people or for other organisations to know. You guys have conversations with other players, coaches, and BAFA do this, BAFA don't do that.
Yeah.
And it was like we just keep the doors closed, everything in closed. My view is that if you can take opportunities or create opportunities that broaden the horizons, again, pathways for players, exposure for players, as well as the competition, right? Like obviously we all want to win the games we play in. So you want to try and play against the best and be the best, right? That should be a thing that drives you when you're talking about the level you're talking about of participation, or should we say performance? Because I always consider there two approaches: participation and performance, right? So I would say SGS are a performance organisation.
At the time, I think we had the best team in the entire country, and that includes
why not, just to your point, showcasing that, exposing that to other people, get to the point where you lose, You know, like
Yes,
like
exactly.
like
That's what we wanted. We wanted to
yeah,
play
like
against.
what
Yeah,
because you need to keep
yeah.
testing, and then you're like, well, that's where we need to be, like, you know, and
We got to the
it's
point
really
where,
sad to hear, for me to hear that you and your teammates decided, oh, we're not going to get involved in a
well,
Bafta
not
domestic
not
game.
all of us did. Like,
Well, not
a
all,
lot
but
of
you
it.
and some of your teammates, like
I
that's
personally, I played for the Aztecs briefly, and then I
yeah.
was like, you know what? And there were other factors involved in it. Like I was leaving Bristol soon, but I was like, I don't really want to be associated in Bafta if that's how they're going to treat us.
Mm.
Was
Yeah, yeah,
ultimately,
no, and
yeah,
I get it, and
yeah,
you know, there are unfortunately countless other examples of people in different disciplines of the sport, flag, women's, you know, under 19s, etc. And now, you know, they're growing academies now, that have got similar stories that have been put off, or in the past have been put off by, you know, something that BAFA have
yeah,
or haven't done. And it's not like I feel like people in this. I think we've got a lovely community, right? And I always say that people know this sport. We know we can get hurt, you know, as players. We know it's a tough thing, a tough sport to play. We love the sport, and people like. There's a really nice community in British American football, and people have got a lot of people have got really good intentions, and they are forgiving, and they will give people a chance, and they will think, you know, critically or subjectively about things. Um, but when you're then when that's not met by, you know, the national governing body or the club that you're speaking to or whatever, then you become
yeah,
dejected. You know,
yeah.
and you're like, well, why should I get involved in this sport? I can just go to another one, or I can just
Yeah.
work out and
So,
not risk
so me
injury. You know, like,
personally, now I loved American football, and that's the sport that I wanted to play. I had
mm,
other options. So I was playing for Pride at the time, and I had multiple scholarship offers to play in America, and I was going to take one of them. I hadn't decided which one yet. I was like,
mm,
why am I wasting my time playing in a league where they hate the team that I played for that gave me the opportunity to get these scholarship offers? I'm not going to risk
yeah,
getting injured. Like as you said, it's a very violent sport. So I was like, right, I'm just going to take some time off
mm,
and just work out and do the conditioning stuff necessary, because I was like, it's not worth it. Whereas if I felt as though, oh, BAFA really helped me, and I was like, I love playing in BAFA and I love the people who are running it, I probably would have just kept playing.
yeah,
And yeah,
yeah. Well,
maybe it was for the best, because like we said, you never know when something can happen. It's a violent sport, and I didn't, obviously, if I got injured, then it wouldn't have been
yeah,
very
and,
good
yeah.
for me. Yeah,
That's obviously always a risk, but
yeah,
I feel like it's yeah, it's the national governing body should almost feel like the referees should in a game where they're there, they make decisions, they don't, they're not the center of the show. They're just making it all happen. You
yeah.
know, like I'm sure you know, and you've played in games where referees sort of like just made wrong decisions. They're not working with you. They're not telling you. They're
Yeah,
not
terrible.
communicating with you.
Yeah.
And that's what. And it's really frustrating when it's when it was at a national governing body level. I feel like there's still some. There's always going to be room for improvement, right? But I feel like we're headed in the right direction with our governing body now. But yeah, if you and I had this conversation 4 or 5 years ago, I would be lambasting them,
Yeah,
um, because yeah,
yeah.
they were awful. But I would say that they're like, you know, year on year they're making better decisions. They're getting there. They're starting to listen to people. We've got a new CEO now. He was he came from I think handball, so another small
Okay.
sport governing body in the UK. You know,
Yeah.
and he's still finding his feet. Look, like been in role like a month, but yeah, like it's positive. It's, you know, this is all good stuff that I think it's a very optimistic time for people involved in British American football at the moment.
It sounds so much better, and I think
Mm.
actually, although you might not give yourself credit, I personally think, from what I know, that you are massively responsible for the change, because I think I mean, something had to happen to kickstart everything, and thinking, oh, we need to change. This is not good enough.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
took something very, very serious, unfortunately. And I'm not saying, oh, there's a silver lining to it. It was awful, right?
Mm.
So you, as a journalist, broke a story which uncovered serious corruption in BAFA. And I have a
Yeah.
lot of respect for you for doing so. I think you know exactly what I'm referencing here. Would you
Yeah,
mind
yeah, yeah.
taking this opportunity to let everybody know what it was?
Yeah, so this was
I think it was
this was
2019. Was it around then?
17.
17, right?
I think it was 17. I think.
I think I
I
was in
remember
America, so it might have been.
looking at it the other
Yeah,
day. But so this is when we were Gridiron Memes or
yeah,
UK Gridiron Memes, and again fueled the whole thing of like we need to spin off into another outlet because of how people were able to fire shots at us for posting something serious. But essentially, we were approached by two individuals that had a number of pieces of information on like corruption and collusion within the national governing body. Sorry, national team, national American football team structure, in particular, or specifically the women's structure. So GB Women's, which was in its early years, and there was also some very serious allegations. So we had this initial stuff about like unfair treatment and inappropriate behavior. So things like um, a young player in the squad was forced to share a bed in a hotel with an older player that was a lesbian, and she was a younger straight girl, and she didn't like it, and they were like, "Doesn't matter, you just got to do it." Just stuff like safeguarding stuff. But then also there was talk of like if you weren't eligible to play for GB and you played in the women's domestic league, you were never invited to play for in a tournament called the Sapphire Series that happened at the time. Because they didn't want to see, they were using the Sapphire Series as like a GB tryouts, which they shouldn't have done. So it was annoying a lot of players that like, I don't know, Irish, whatever, from Europe that they were really good players, but they weren't able to play in this Sapphire Series, this national version, like tournament that would happen
right.
because the GB coaches stopped them from doing it. There were things like if someone had a problem, they were sort of ignored. And then if anyone did speak up, they were blacklisted out of the sport, not even allowed to play at domestic level. So there was all this stuff that we were complained about. And then when we started looking into stuff to get evidence and understand things better, we started to come across sexually inappropriate behavior from coaches to players, including consensual sexual relationships which weren't allowed. There's something about coaches and teachers; they're like in a position of trust; they're not
Yeah.
allowed to. So yeah, like I mean, you could argue like, so what? It's two grown adults, like whatever, but still not a good look for the GB structure.
It's like you're not supposed
And
to have a relationship with your boss in a workplace because it's their
yeah, stuff
power.
like that. So
Yeah,
like,
regardless.
so I don't know what the correct terminology is, but stuff is frowned upon, right? Like they're just
Yeah,
but then there were more serious things like they were naming plays and stunts, so parts of plays, the D-line stunts, inappropriately, like with language that would make the women feel uncomfortable, like moist and muff, slag, for example, and it's like what the fuck is that? Sorry, it's just I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but like
yes,
like why would you do that? What? Like you're the national governing body level. You're GB level, and just for a little laugh, you're a little immature boy calling something slag, so that
yeah,
someone has to say slag in the fucking in
yeah.
sorry. I'm still quite passionate about it, as you can tell, in
That's
the
fine.
in the huddle or whatever, and it just for like cheap laughs, and basically anyone that spoke up was like frozen out of the game. So that's why they came to me, and they did this big expose on it, and Baffa then tried to get it taken down. So I won't tell like the story blow for blow, but essentially what happened was like they didn't know we ran Gridiron Memes anonymously at the
Yes,
time. Although people knew that I run it. If someone asked me, I'd tell them, and it really,
yeah,
But if someone messaged the page saying, "Who is it that runs this?" By the way, I wouldn't mind telling them. If someone was like, saying, "I demand to know who you are." Then I'd just say like, "Oh, Mickey Mouse" or whatever, just like mess around with them. So yeah, if someone was like cool, I didn't mind telling them. Anyway, Baffa didn't know, and they were sending letters out to loads of different people through these lawyers, and people were contacting me that knew I ran Gridiron, saying, "Baffa think I run Gridiron Memes. They've sent me this lawyer." I was like, "Just ignore it, mate. Nothing. They haven't got a clue." And then I can't remember what I did, but I did it on purpose. I said publicly that I run Gridiron Memes. And then Baffa then started to target me with their lawyers and stuff. And they were basically trying to get me done for defamation.
But you haven't said
Now,
it isn't true. The sources
there was nothing. Well, so I obviously have looked into defamation law since as part of it, but defamation, if it it's not defamation if it's true, and
yeah,
it's also from a media outlet's perspective, it's not defamation if it's in the public interest.
yes,
So you can say something false, but your protection is sorry that was false.
yeah,
Like your legal protection, you still need to say you still need to apologise that something was wrong, but you say sorry we posted something false. It was relevant to our audience to post that. We this is why we believed it. This is why we posted it, right? Now running a memes page, we were used to just shipping things through quickly, right? Someone comes up with an idea, bang, 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 fire it out. I always call it. I was talking to my wife about it last night. I call it fast media, and slow media being journalism. So fast media, like idea, meme, post, hundreds and thousands of views, brilliant. And then to replicate that from an article perspective, yourself, research, fact checking,
yeah.
writing it, rewriting it,
You
getting
can't
images,
you can't just
featuring
do
it,
that. You need to
tagging stuff, categories,
yeah.
post. Like it's so much different,
It's
and that's why I call it slow media compared to
yeah.
the fast media of memes, right? For me, they're on the same spectrum, can cover the same topics, but one can cover it so much quicker than the other. And anyway, so we were used to this fast cycle stuff, but we took our time with this because of the level of severity of it. But again, so we did these posts saying like how important it was. Baffa and their lawyers had complained to Facebook about it, and it got taken down in the UK only because of their complaint. The complaint was never upheld. It was just Facebook's way of saying we don't want to take it down, but we don't want to have any legal issue. And it really annoyed me that did, because I was like, that's the people that need to see it. Coinciding with that, the GB women's team were about to go and play a tournament, and so they were actually all together, and so were the coaches, and they took that opportunity. The coaches did to like basically make me out as a liar, like say that I've made it up, that and I don't know why I would make it, but it was easy to say it, I suppose, when we were a meme page, right?
Yeah.
Easy to cast doubt. But I was very explicit in the post saying this isn't our usual content, like it's not a meme. This is serious. But you're not. It's sort of, if you're in a glass house throwing a stone there, right? People can very easily point the finger back at you if they don't agree with you. So that sort of, it weakened the position. And then I realised. So after,
agree with you if it's literally just a fact. This has been happening.
but people are
Obviously,
used to
done
us not
everything
posting that type of factual content. That was the problem.
Yeah.
People are, it's a meme page. It's a meme
That
page.
doesn't mean
They
you
always
can't.
post stupid stuff. But
Yeah.
sorry.
But that doesn't mean you can't. So it doesn't matter.
No,
Where
but that was
truth.
It was easy. It was easy for those
Yeah.
coaches and those people to criticize us and to cast out. And there's still players, right? This is years later. There's still players that played for that squad that think that we were lying and made it up. So there's a head coach in Uniball. She will not do anything with Sport Tank because of the Gridiron Memes posting all those years ago about this.
One of the teammates was raped by one of the coaches.
Yes. So as more stuff came out, I quickly realised this is more serious. Like these are like police. These are custodial sentence offences that are happening. These are criminal things that are happening. So yeah, the sexual sexual assault that happened was the most severe thing that I think we came across. And the girl that it happened, this wasn't told to us like, well, it was initially told to us by other people, but then the girl that it happened to contacted us, and I've got all the messages. So I ended up working with different, like, contacted different journalists and media outlets. I was like, this is outgrown Gridiron Memes, and also with the wrong outlet. And I posted to say this, with the wrong outlet. That post is still up; you can see it. But anyway, it didn't get taken on by. It got taken on by an independent journalist who published something about it, but it didn't make the waves it needed to. But
which outlet did that? Remember
which
publication was it that took it on?
So he self-published on. I think he definitely did it on YouTube. I can't remember if there was another website he did it on.
The Medium's probably the most.
I can't. I've seen it. But I can't remember what it was. Okay. But it didn't make way. We shared it, posted it, and I was like, draw a line under it. But essentially, BAFA. So they didn't have a defamation case. What they were trying to do was get a super injunction. So they needed a defamation case to go through, and then they could super injunction it and stop anyone talking about it. Yeah. That's what they were trying to do. Now I went all out, right? Like, I wanted to help these women. I was amazed. Like, that BAFA tried to do. They said they did an internal investigation, and then found themselves to be. They said they were going to do an independent audit. And then they did it internally themselves. And the BAFA CEO at the top, or not CEO, but whatever he was, managing director, they had different titles then, sent a message to the different women saying, was you sexually abused? Those are the exact words.
Was you
yeah, and I've got a screenshot of it with his signature, his BAFA signature underneath it. Was you sexually abused? So it was just all farcical, right? And I then started going to the government about it, like government bodies. And Sport England were very interested in it. The compliance individual from there, I think her name was Catherine. She listened to everything I said, and I was like, they're unstructured, they're terrible, like they don't listen to people anyway outside of stuff, but this is really serious stuff. And they got in contact with BAFA, and there were 5 BAFA directors at the time. All of them left the sport. A new structure got brought in with a board of directors and a chair. The chair, prior to her going in role, asked to meet with me, and that's when she confirmed with me that it was £65,000 that BAFA had spent trying to sue me. She said it's a joke, it should never have happened, and I'm stopping it immediately. I don't even know if I posted about that. Maybe I should have, because it would help alleviate some of the concerns of these. Yeah. There's only a few of them that are still around that hold this against me when they were falsely told that I made it up. But yeah, it's essentially it was just to go back to what you started off with. It as a result of it, the sport was completely restructured. Those people that were in charge are not there. And the sport's in a better place for it. So I don't like you said, I don't take credit for it. I don't think it is me that done it. I just I let people know who then took action. I think, I didn't do anything. I helped a load of women that were desperate. One of them,
thought you were the voice for them.
And their voice.
You gave them
and that's essentially what Gridiron Memes was anyway for a long time. And that's what I talk about, holding the national governing body accountable, because no matter who you went to in that governing body, no one was going to listen to you, right? No, they were just going to sweep everything under the rug, and that's what they kept doing again and again. And it got to
someone who said they investigated themselves and found no corruption. It's like when the US, it's like when the US government investigates themselves and finds no corruption.
Good for CIA, that means nothing.
Isn't it? The FBI investigates themselves every year to see if they can find any corruption. And surprise, no corruption whatsoever yet.
And people were going nuts about, as much as I'm saying there were people that were opposed to me, there was a hell of a lot more people that were backing us, backing what I was saying, and backing and saying thank you, and still get people occasionally mention it to me, saying thanks for what you did. It was great. And I think that there's it's funny because all I was at the time was someone that ran a memes page, and it taught me a lot about defamation, publication, journalism, sexual assault, like, and how to conduct yourself, because you know I acted within the best of intentions, but if I had the same thing again, I'd handle it completely differently, I think.
There's a little bit
Because
more.
I now know
Uh,
what a potential backlash looks like. Right?
yeah.
I never expected the women's team to turn around, and it was some members of the women's team obviously were the ones that were abused that were contacting me, and then there was others that were like that were completely against it and just saying loads of shit. But
So
one of the women that in question, she was a doctor.
right.
She was talking about some of this like unfair treatment of the women by the coaches, and the fact that it fell on deaf ears. Even if you went to the safeguarding director, they wouldn't do anything about it. And she had mental health issues that she was trying to raise with the organisation to say, look, I need help with these things because of my. So she was a doctor that was able to sort of. She knew herself really well, right? And so, in my opinion, quite highly credible. And she was planning on doing more stuff with me. Like her and I got on quite well when we talked, but it stopped because she killed herself. And I'm not saying that she killed herself because of Baffa, but it certainly didn't help that the thing she loved, like absolutely loved in her life, was taken away from her. She wasn't able.
Yeah.
She was told she wasn't allowed to play. She was one of those blacklisted out of the sport.
I can't imagine that it helped in the
No, but
slightest.
like, and
Probably.
yeah, and like
Yeah.
I yeah, something that I hate.
Yeah.
It
That's
was
horrible. Yeah.
yeah, it was horrific going through it all, and it was after that I really put a push in to try and get it into external media outlets. And interestingly, I spoke. There's a guy at my son's school that I was talking to who's a journalist. Sorry, he's an editor, and his brother currently works for Reuters. And he said, if
Okay.
you want to do this, he said, I'll get my brother involved and we can get it posted. So, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like I don't feel like I need to clear my name. Like that would be
Yeah.
really the main reason to do it. I like
Yeah.
it's to
There's
sort of
there's
say
still
this is
people.
actually true. I feel like publicly everything was denied, but then privately everything was sorted. And so I'm like, well, yeah, the sport's got what it needs. Maybe these women don't have what they need. Maybe there does need to be. I feel like a couple of those coaches and those in charge should be put in prison.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't like. I've. It's not something I think about in terms of, oh, we need to go back and do something with that. It for me, it's like I've got all the information, and I feel like it should be someone that was involved directly, abused, that should be reporting that to the police or taking it to a reporter. The fact that we did get the police involved and they started to interview individuals, players, coaches, because there was about 30 people that came forward, right, all saying that thanks and this is what they did, and some stuff
Yeah.
was some
And
stuff was more petty, I would say, and probably could be overlooked, but some stuff was really
And you
severe.
mentioned one of the players who was on that team who obviously doesn't believe any of them because she won't do any work with you whatsoever. I was like, well,
Yeah,
why is she? Why? I
I
was like,
don't know.
surely it'd be enough to spark her interest. If there's 30 of them, then maybe.
She doesn't want
Like
to.
the,
Like
it's
so.
like the
So I,
It's like the Sean Watson when he got accused of like 40 plus masseuse. If it was one, you think, oh, maybe she's lying. 40 of them.
yeah.
Hmm.
I
Maybe
don't know
something's-
because I don't like. So there was an instance in the last 6 months where I'd posted under my name on something on Facebook, and then a female player from a Scottish team was like, we basically got into it and ended up getting into the whole GB women's thing from years ago, and I maintained the same information that I just given you. Well, obviously there's a little bit more, and her information, I said to her, it's like, your information's from about 2 months into the whole thing. Like, it's like you've cut off there and not had any additional information. And I was like, here, like, and I sent her a couple of links and I said, oh, there's a YouTube video. I tried to find it. The guy had taken it down. But I tried to get him to put it back up, but he said he can't find it. So that's annoying. But yeah. And I was like, if you've got any questions, like, let me know. So the way that I see it is like, I've been completely open. I welcome people coming and ask me questions about it if there's any seed of doubt, because I can handle every question. I can show every piece of evidence. I've published it all anyway. It's all on a Google Drive that's available, right? the lawyer letters, the screenshots. I've redacted and anonymized things where relevant, but you can see all of the information. Because I was like, I sort of like washed my hands of it. I was like, this is too big for me. Here's everything. Do what you will with it. I'm out, sort of thing. Like it's not worth the hassle, but I'm also I'm with the wrong outlet to deal with it.
Yeah.
And so there are. I believe that anyone that's got anything negative to say about it, or still holds these different, like, that thinks I'm lying, that's the worst one. They've got dated information. They haven't bothered to look into the evidence. And that individual that I'm talking about, a mutual friend of ours who told me about it all anyway. I didn't know that that person held those beliefs. I asked them to arrange, like, just to say, like, what's it called? Extend the olive branch. Like, say to her, look, if you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. But I think you've got the wrong information. You're incorrect.
Yes.
But like, and then the message came back, doesn't want to talk to you, doesn't want anything to do.
Well,
like,
it's very interesting.
If that's the mindset I'm dealing with, that closed mindset, whatever. But yeah, so there's a small number of people out there that still think that it was just made up. I just love to understand. I'd love to have a conversation.
There were quite a lot at the time, though, weren't there? Definitely.
Yeah. But then that was coordinated, and I got it confirmed. That was coordinated by the coaches. The head coach of the GB women's team at the time coordinated, and got all of the GB women's players, or all of them, a number of them, to post opposing views and comments in my post, and I called it out. And as soon as I called it out, I get a couple of messages from other members of the team saying, "Yeah, you're right. That's what Jim did." Jim Messenger's the guy who was the head coach, these guys are just like, it was like what I called it, Stockholm syndrome. You don't understand who you end up with a affection for your captor or your oppressor, right? Yeah. I was like, you guys are being awfully treated by this guy. I'm shining a light on it. It's actually encouraging more women to come through with other stories, which some, like I say, some horrific. And then you're turning around and calling me a liar. And one of the questions of that. Oh yeah, actually, going back to that Scottish player that I had a conversation with. Within about 20 minutes of that conversation, I'd screenshotted everything, but she'd deleted all of those comments. I then went and looked on her profile, and she had taken down her Facebook profile. It was taken down for about 4 months, and it went back up again after that. So someone has immediately seen that and got on her case and said, don't talk about this or whatever, and it's gone. Right. So there's still people out there, and I think it's coaching staff. I think it's the more senior players that were closer to the coaches that are the ones that are holding those beliefs and not listening to anything that we say. I say.
There's a lot of instances, not just this one, where it's like the journalists get so much abuse online for reporting stories like this because they just don't want to believe it for whatever reason, even though all the evidence suggests it, whether it's it goes against a narrative or whatever. Or
do you know, I had one recently where the current GB coach doesn't like me because we posted a story, 2 stories within quick succession. Of him. So one, he accosted a player from an opposing team on camera, swearing and shouting at him for putting a flag in the ground when he lost the final. Straight after, grabbed him, and we posted about that, saying like, you can't do that, TV head coach, right? A couple of weeks later, he's coaching the senior team. At the time, Tamworth Phoenix was he was the head coach of. One of his players goes down injured, and he drags the player about 5 meters. So goes on the field and just drags him to get.
You get an injury timeout.
The guy hadn't been assessed or anything. Like, there was no need for him to come on the field and do that. And so we again called it out. And this guy, it's not, for me, it's one-way traffic. Like, he hates us or hates me. Doesn't want anything to do with me. And I was speaking to one of his coaches, and he said, "Oh yeah, there was also the thing where you posted screenshots from." The WhatsApp groups of GB, and we posted that because the coaches were encouraging the players to harass the other team's players. And we had examples of not just them saying it, but also examples of it being done, like in comments in Instagram of opposing players, girlfriends, all that sort of stuff, right?
Like whistleblowing, isn't it? So
Yeah, so we
yeah,
posted about that,
that's pretty cool.
and the guy I was talking to was like, that was you shouldn't have posted that, and I was like, we're a media outlet, of course I'm going
Yeah,
to post that.
of
Like,
course. Yeah.
you're taking it out on me. It's not my fault.
Obviously, you
If you're
didn't.
angry with anyone, be angry with
Yeah.
the person that leaked it, or be angry with the person that fucking said it.
Yes.
But,
I was like,
so
obviously, you
like
didn't
that's
hack
I
into
think
that
that's
one.
the problem
Yeah.
is journalists get and journalism gets the brunt of stuff because it's like the emotional reaction to the thing happening, because you're the one that's told people, but you've told people because like all that everything that we publish is for the betterment of the game. I do not believe that the current GB head coach is suitable. I think he's good at his job. I don't have anything against the guy as a person. I genuinely don't. He does against me, and that's what I'm saying. There's like a lot of one-way traffic you get as a journalist. You're like, this person hates you, and you're like, oh, all right, cool.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
good for him.
actually,
Yeah. But
I
like,
started to
I
welcome
want
it.
GB to do well.
Yeah.
I want the game to prosper and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, there are people in the sport that hold things against my outlet and me because we've published them, and in publishing them, it's to shine a light on it, get it sorted, make sure it gets fixed, right?
I
And I
started to
guarantee
welcome it
you,
eventually. Yeah.
I
It
guarantee
is just
you that those group chats will be nice and clean now, and you won't get anyone
because you got the threat of
saying, yeah,
somebody.
because you like because
Yeah. Yeah.
all it's going to take is one disgruntled player to screenshot
Yeah.
this, and it's going to be fired up in front of everyone, and it
Well,
should be right. Like you
should be
should be held
professional in the
accountable.
first place. Yeah. Shouldn't have
So
needed
yeah,
to
so like
come to that
that's the
in
whole
the first
point I
place.
go back
Yeah.
to with the meme thing is like holding these individuals within the sport accountable for their ridiculous behaviour. There was a university coach who was actually part of BAFA, who had like he basically all of the coaching staff left, loads of players left at the end of the season. It's going to be weird to see how they get on this next season because they got promoted to the National Prem. So I don't know how they're going to get on, but one of the best teams in the country, and they basically fell apart in the off season because of this head coach. And all of these different things came out about and they're allegations, right? But there were a couple of things that were sustained with like a WhatsApp group that was like for the boys, and they would just like talk about other players, and this is with players. So and he had like a group of people that they brought in. And it was turned into like a bit of a boys' club, and you're like, well, this person, and that's like on its own bad. Yeah, the guy ended up leaving his position. That's fine. He's still got a role at BAFA. Should that type of person be at BAFA? And the problem is that it is the whole thing. Well, not the whole thing. I think it is changing, but there's still a lot of boys' club mentality. The awards that get given out each year is for coaching or participation or whatever, all to everyone's buddies.
Yeah.
I was at the final on Sunday, and the commentators. They were like there was commentators in the stadium, and they were funny guys, and it was good. But like they were like shouting out all of their friends and drawing attention to their mates. You're like if you don't know them and you don't know you, what the hell are you doing that for? It's just a lot of like I don't know. Like there's these little cliques within the sport that I think make it worse, and have resulted in a lot of really poor decision making. And for me, I like we're not biased, right? So like BAFA don't like us because of that. Well, actually, we got past the expose thing. They don't like me because their last CEO basically like stitched us up and stopped working with us, and then I started calling them out. But I said to the chair, BAFA chair, when I met her, like, and she agreed, like, we need to be able to be independent and call you out. But the problem is that they now close themselves off and they don't want to work with us, and you're like, whatever. Like it's this small sport mentality, and it's a problem from a journalistic perspective because even with our picks, we say one team's going to win, one team's going to lose. The team that's going to lose take that personally. Their coaches will manipulate that into fodder to motivate the team, and then the team are like, oh yeah, fuck you, like
Well,
you said we were going
that's
to
fine.
lose.
I was like,
And you're
use
like,
it as motivation then, but it's like,
yeah,
you're doing your job.
but then they take it personally because they're the
Yeah,
players. Whereas if it was
yeah,
to a group of fans, it would be completely different, right?
Yes.
People would go back and forth. They see more reason, but people take it personally when it's them on the field or them on the sideline, calling the
Well,
plays.
we put ourselves in the bullseye as
Hmm.
journalists. So, to start off with, when I got online abuse, which I did get very frequently, almost every week when I was
Yeah,
working as a journalist, I started to be like, oh, I was like, that's not very nice. And eventually, it got to the point where I'd print off the hateful comments and put them on the fridge for people. Everybody else started doing the same thing, and everybody thought it was hilarious.
yeah,
It ended up being like something that was like funny, like who can get the worst comment from
yeah.
somebody. And the worst one I got, and I really shouldn't laugh at this because it was a very serious story, was like I got called. I read a story in a local newspaper once, nothing to do with sports, about there was a hospital which was a women's only hospital,
Hmm.
and one of the patients raped a few of the women who were there, and I was like, well, that's awful. I was like, why isn't this front page news? Anyway, it's just a little column in a newspaper which I read. So I looked into it, and I wrote an article and I published it on for the company that I worked for at the time. And all of the comments were like, "Oh, this guy's a transphobe," or just like, because he's saying that because the guy who obviously it was a man pretending to be a woman, right?
Right.
And it was I should have mentioned that to start with. It was a man pretending to be a woman, so the hospital said, "Yeah, obviously you are a woman." I was like, because if you feel as though you're a woman, then you are, and I don't care what anybody's opinion on that is. Like, you can't let it get to that level. So I
Hmm.
wrote a story on it, and I didn't hold back. Granted, I said a lot of things which were definitely not sugarcoating it, like saying it's like you can't let it get to this. It's a mental illness. You can't let it get to this level. It's like, what about all these people? Instead of saying, "Oh, that's horrible that happened," there's like those poor women who were like, "This guy's a transphobe and attacking me personally." I was like, "Well,
Right.
I just broke the story. I didn't actually break the story. Somebody else did, and I just followed up."
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, that's the kind of abuse we got as
Yeah. So
journalists. I
yeah,
was
that's
yeah,
and for me, the future of Sport Tank in terms of running it is away from that, right? We
yeah,
won't be creating content. We'll be the platform that it's posted on,
yes,
to be, I'm quite looking forward to that because of the amount of, abuse and negative. Like I said, we're all volunteers, right? Everyone that does create content from a media perspective for Sport Tank does it voluntarily, and we've had people complain about uh, how excited our commentators got when a team scored a touchdown, but didn't get as excited when the other team scored. And my like I'll sort of address stuff, but some stuff I don't. I just think shut up. But
yeah,
like that one was like the commentators got excited because it was like a 60-yard touchdown to and the team that scored were 3 scores down at the time. So it was that's more exciting than the team that's 3 scores up.
yeah,
I don't know,
of
score a
course,
20-yarder or whatever.
yeah,
Like so, like and then like I don't know, they just say like stuff like about I don't know, we don't know player numbers and all this sort of stuff, and or sorry, player names. You know their numbers, you see them.
yeah,
But like yeah, so it's yeah. There's no matter what you do in the media world, when you put something out there for people to consume, that consumption you have no control over. They may enjoy it, they may hate it, and they are entitled to their opinion, and you've just got to
yeah.
be thick-skinned and deal with it.
I
Although
never
when they
caused
turn to the
anything
point
to
of
be. Yeah,
abuse, though, that's when I'll ban them, and
yeah.
I'll ban. I don't care about who I ban from our platforms
Oh,
if
I
they're going to be
firmly
abusive.
believe that you shouldn't censor people even if they strongly disagree with you. You should give them the platform, and then the best way to go about it is instead of taking a comment down, you combat it with more speech. Right, I'm a
Okay.
massive believer in freedom of speech, First Amendment. If you're American,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's an interesting thing. Like when you were saying about commentating, obviously, mine was slightly different to yours. I actually worked for SGS when I was commentating, so mine was more of a hometown commentary, home
Yeah.
team commentary.
Yeah.
So
That's different.
I literally just said at the start, I was like, yeah, this is the team I used to play for. This is the team that's paying me my salary, so I'm going to be biased towards them.
Yep.
And if you got a
And and
problem
and,
with
and
that,
I've
I
been the
suggest
same, and I've
you
been on
can, yeah,
broadcast.
yeah,
So like because it the other thing is it's amateur, right? Like we're
yeah,
not and Sport Tank is impartial and is independent, but the people that are involved in it aren't, right? Like everyone's attached to a team. We've come from the sport, so
yes,
there's always going to be, I know more information about these players because I've played with them, and we've had that where we've had commentators that were both used to play for the London Olympians, and we were doing a London Olympians, I think, versus Norwich Devils game, and the guy knew so much about all the players. Oh yeah, he's done that. And someone said, "Oh, you're not saying loads of stuff about the Devils," and like, well, we can
Don't know
only
much
do what
about
we
them.
know. Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't know. Like, what do you mean? Make stuff up? Like, and what do you do? Not do that? Not support the team that you've played for, you're registered to, or you've got a history with? Of course you should. You don't want to overstep the mark and then abuse
Yeah.
and make
So
it an uncomfortable experience for the other team. But there's nothing wrong with you being like, yes, that's a good touchdown. I'm so
yeah.
pleased. Like there's nothing wrong with that at all.
I remember the game that we commentated on SGS versus Cardiff. There was one that was like it was a blowout. It was like 42-0 in the end. But there was one player who played for Cardiff who kept mentioning, "Oh, this guy's pretty good. He's making tackles." So obviously none of us knew who he was. So I went down at halftime and interviewed the other team's head coach. Brilliant, 3-minute interview. It was fine. Just asked for his name and something about him. So we mentioned that. I was like, we'll do our best to find out.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also, it was a 42-0 win for Pride, so obviously most of the comments are going to be about that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. It's. I don't think you can ever fully move away from it until you become semi-pro or pro, right? So, like, let's say I said to you, "Oh, can you go and commentate this game? I'll give you £100. You need to be as impartial as possible." Well, that now you would have to, right? Like, because
Well, you'd have to do your preparation and
yeah,
research.
absolutely.
So
Yeah. I'd expect that as well, right? Like you should know stats, players, all that sort of
Yes.
stuff, right? But I would expect you not to hold a grudge against the team or to support the team either way, And I think it's okay to mention as a commentator that you do support a team, but if you're being paid to do something, then it's different. But when it's amateur, so your amateur broadcast, amateur game, I think there's actually I think it actually adds to the value of it when you've got people that are passionate and from the sport or from a particular team giving you those insights and giving you that extra oomph in their commentary because of it. So yeah, I just think that people it's that same, we're going back to it again, comparing it to an NFL broadcast or comparing it to something on Sky Sports. We're not Sky Sports, we're not the BBC. We want to engage the audience. We put comments up on screen. You can ask me a question if I say the word sack and you don't know what it means. It's completely different. And that's what, like, I think it fits the sport right now because we need the sport to grow. We want people to feel welcome. We want family and friends that are watching to understand what their son or daughter's doing on screen and how well they're doing. And the other thing that happened recently was a player went down. A player scored a touchdown in the game. And his dad had been commenting in the chat, and we were going back and forth with him. And then he went down injured, and it looked like a bad one. And we were like, "Oh no, that's whichever the player's name." And his dad was like, "Is he okay?" Coming up in the comments, "Is he okay?" And we were giving him updates, and obviously through the broadcast, right? Like saying, "Oh, it looks like it." And then when the player was eventually back on his feet, we're able to pan the camera over and zoom in and say, "Look, here he is." And the dad popped into the chat and was like, "Oh, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it."
Yeah, of course.
That you would never get that experience with Sky or BBC, right? You
No,
can't.
you
And
can't.
that's what I think. Like I said, it adds to the character and adds to the value of our broadcast. They're a little bit rough and ready. You can interact with what we're doing, and the all important thing is that people have a good experience. And I'd like to think that if you ask that father now, like, about Sport Tank or about what happened that day, he'd be like, "Yeah, they were good guys. That was good."
Sure.
So yeah, so I'm always quick to point that stuff out when people do criticize what we do. Not only are we volunteers, but we're also trying to help educate people, grow the game. Provide the best coverage possible of it, but that is at the right level, and with the right motivations.
Yeah. Okay, a couple of last questions. Finish on something a little bit more light-hearted. So the Brit Bowl final was last week.
Yes.
Sunday. What did you make of it? I haven't actually watched it. I've flicked through a few of the.
I was there, so yeah.
Yeah.
It was more one-sided than I wanted it. It ended up more one-sided than I wanted it to be. Even at halftime, I think it was it was either a 3 or a 6 point game. It was quite close. I think it was 16-10. I think it was half time. The second half was just a bit of a blowout. The Aztecs basically couldn't stop the Warriors. And yeah, I would rather it. I always want competitive games. I wanted the Aztecs to win. I thought head says Warriors, heart said Aztecs, and that's because I played for the Aztecs a few years ago. But I have friends on both sides. Obviously, media cover both teams. I love the Warriors. I think they're brilliant. It wasn't like a rivalry thing for me. I just like the Aztecs have got to their first final ever. I was so pleased for Coach Pete to get them there, and obviously the players that I know. So yeah, it was more one-sided than I think the Aztecs would have wanted it to be. But if you're a Warriors fan, you'd be like, oh, we always start slow and then we get them at the end, and that's how they play. The Warriors are the kings of making adjustments in a game to beat you up.
Well, that's what it is, really.
I don't mean that they're aggressive when they need to be. They can play you clean, they can play you dirty. They're great. They're a great side, but great athletes. Their defense was unbelievable. Just so fast and just so reactive. As soon as there was running back just pops out from behind the tackle, on an outside run, just completely swallowed up, or running to the edge. There was nothing beat the edge. I don't think I saw one run a sweep that turned upfield, because they were just too quick in bringing bodies down to shepherd people out of bounds. So it was there was some really good play, but it was more dominant. It was more dominant in the second half for the Warriors. I'd say. Well, obviously it was because of the score. I enjoyed it. I think and you're going back to the whole was it a good representation of British football? Yeah, it was good. It was good quality of football. That was worth paying to watch. I think they put on a good performance. I
would take it as a win for this season. They made progress. They beat the team they lost to in the semi-final twice. The Aztecs did. They beat the Titans in Manchester. Third time's the charm.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I would be quite happy with them. I think they've come a long way in the past decade or so.
Yeah, and the other game that day was the Division 1 final, and that was a massive 49-9. So Nottingham Caesars beat the Rushmore Knights. Now I used to play for Rushmore, so the two teams I used to play for lost on the day.
Never mind. Maybe you're a jinx then.
But even though Rushmore lost that, I was speaking to some of their coaches and players after it, were well, look at the season though. They got promoted. They went undefeated apart from the final. And then as a club, their under-19s and their under-16s both won the national championships. So that's one of the best clubs in the country. Yeah, they got it handed to them on Sunday in that game in the final, but that doesn't mean it's not a successful time for that club. It's they got a lot to be proud of. I don't even consider that silver lining. I think that's a genuine. That's a genuine statement. They've got the best under-19 and under-16 programs in the country at the moment, both. And everyone will also always tell you in this sport in the UK, if you want to have a good senior team, you need to have good under-19 and under-16s. So because they feed, it comes through. Not that you retain 100% of those players that go through, but you've got constant talent coming through. And if they're the national champion talent, it bodes well for the future for the Knights.
Sounds good to me. All right. Thank you very much for coming on, Steve. That was great content there.
You're welcome. Cheers, Steve.
Yeah. All right.